Congrats, you've successfully registered for the Show Your Camera Who's Boss free training webinar. You know, I'm so excited for you. You're gonna learn some amazing stuff on this webinar. In fact, this free training webinar has the potential, if you let it, to change your photography forever. You could finally start taking the images that you see in your head and confidently take control of your camera. All right, so a few things I want you to do right now, all right? I want you to go ahead and mark off your webinar time in your calendar. There's a little button somewhere left or right over here to add it to your calendar. I want you to mark off about an hour and a half of time, life-transforming time, about an hour of training and about a half an hour of Q&A session. Mark it off, put it on your calendar, be prepared to show up, take notes, and learn, because this free training could change your life. All right. I also want you to check your email real quick. Make sure you got the link to the webinar room. And if for some reason it's in promotions or a spam folder, make sure and mark it not as spam so you make sure you get our next reminder. And then the other thing I want you to do is add your phone number so that you can get one text reminder about 15 minutes before the webinar starts, because I know life is busy for you and I want to make sure that you do not miss this free training, because you do not want to miss it. All right, so I'm so excited for you. You're gonna learn some amazing stuff on the free training webinar. One other thing I wanted to mention real quick is that it's best to watch the webinar on a desktop or a laptop computer, because the webinar software doesn't work amazing on a phone or a tablet like an iPhone or an iPad. So make sure and watch it from a laptop or a desktop for the best learning experience. All right, so one thing I didn't mention yet is that I'm gonna be giving away a free lens. This is a nifty 50 lens. It's a 50mm lens, and I always recommend for photographers to have a 50mm lens because of multiple things. One of the things is that you can shoot in lower light situations. So if it's indoors, if the light's fading, if it's night, if it's a concert, you can shoot in more tricky situations because that lens allows more light to come in. And that's a really amazing tool to have in your camera bag. All right. The other thing that it does is it allows you to shoot portraits that are super sharp, super crisp, but has the background be gorgeously blurry in the background. Okay, so that lens is super amazing. I'm going to be giving it away to one of you guys who are live on the webinar, and I actually might do another giveaway as well. Haven't decided yet. It'll be a game time decision. All right, so there are 3 factors that go into controlling your camera so that you can take the images that you see in your head and take amazing images every single time. And what I wanted to do is I want to give you guys a head start. I wanted to do a free training for y'all right now before you go to the webinar. So I'm going to play a video right now. Just stick on and watch this video, and it's a free tutorial right now about how to take those super sharp portraits where your subject looks super crisp, but the background looks super blurry. I'm gonna teach you how to do that right now. If you don't have time, if you don't have another 10 minutes to watch this video, no problem. We're gonna email you a link to rewatch this video at a later time, but it would be good for you to watch it before the webinar. You don't have to, but hey, it's a way to get a head start to start figuring out how to show your camera who's boss. All right, Dave Molnar here. Enjoy this free training. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. The first thing I wanna teach you about in this video is how to shoot those gorgeous portraits where the background looks super, super blurry. We call that a shallow depth of field. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna jump on location real quick with a gorgeous model, Allie, who was actually Miss Tennessee in 2017. And we're gonna show you how to get those gorgeous photos with the blurry background. And it's a lot easier than you think, because instead of jumping all the way to manual mode, we're gonna be jumping to a semi-automatic mode called aperture priority. So here's what you need to know. Aperture is the size of the hole, all right? And there are certain confusing numbers like decimal points. We're not gonna go super into all that stuff because I don't wanna confuse you. I wanna give you baby steps to taking manual control of your camera, okay? But what you do need to know is this. The smaller the aperture or f-stop number is, the more blurry the background is. So it's pretty simple. A smaller f-stop number creates a more blurry background. I'm gonna say that like a third time. Smaller number, more blurry background. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put our cameras in a semi-automatic mode called aperture priority, okay? It works the same way regardless of which camera brand you have, and I'm gonna show you how to do it on each of those 3 brands, Canon, Nikon, and Sony. But all you have to do is try to change your aperture to where you get a smaller number, or the smallest number that you can do with your specific lens, and then the background will be more blurry than it was before. All right, so let's go ahead and jump over to our location. All right, folks, we are on location with our beautiful model, Allie Sutton, and we are going to be showing you how to take those gorgeous photos with the background super blurry. Now, a blurry background is a shallow depth of field. Every single image that we take has depth of field in it. It's just a matter of whether it's shallow or deep depth of field. So if I just take a picture, I don't even know what the camera settings are right now, but if I just take a picture right here, then right now we're showing a pretty deep or large depth of field. You're noticing that a lot of the leaves and everything are looking really crisp in the background, and that's not what we want. What we want is a shallow depth of field where the image is kind of blurry right behind our model's head. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, you'd need to change the aperture, but if you change the aperture, then you really need to change all the other settings when you're in manual mode. So what I want to show you is a semi-automatic or semi-manual mode called aperture priority. So regardless of whether you have a Canon, a Nikon, or a Sony, or any other camera brand, you're going to have an aperture priority mode on your camera, and I'll show you that in just a second. On the Sony camera, all you have to do is switch from M, which is manual mode, to A, which is aperture priority mode. And this dial right here is what will actually change your aperture. See, this says f2.8, that's your aperture. All you have to do is twist this dial right here. As you twist it, the aperture will change, and the camera will automatically set everything else for you. On the Nikon camera, most cameras are set to auto mode, and if you switch all the way up to A stands for aperture priority. And aperture priority is the mode that I've been talking about, where you can set the aperture and the camera will automatically set everything else. If you want to change the aperture, all you have to do is use this dial, this one main dial right here, and as you change the dial, you can see the aperture changing right here. So you change the aperture and it's going to automatically set the shutter speed and the ISO for you. All right, on this Canon camera, we are on the automatic mode. You can see green for A for automatic, and you see this little white line right here denoting that we are on the automatic mode. What I want you to do is switch to the AV mode, which is aperture priority. AV technically stands for aperture value, but it is the aperture priority mode, just like on every other camera model. So if you want to change the aperture, you use our one main dial on this camera right here, and it will change the aperture for you. You can see it changing on the back. Right here, this says 7.1, that's your aperture, measured in f-stops, f7.1. If I change this dial right up here, you see the aperture changing. What's cool is that you set the aperture and the camera will automatically set everything else for you, and you don't have to worry about it. So this is kind of like a cheat to semi-automatically adjust and get the image that you intend to take without controlling all of the functions of the camera. So remember, like I talked about, the smaller number will create a blurrier background. Now there's all sorts of decimals and fractions and all this stuff in photography. I don't want to bore you with all that stuff right now. I just want you to simply understand that you need to switch your camera to aperture priority and then make the number, the aperture, the decimal number, right now it says 4.5 on this camera, you need to make that number the smallest, or at least smaller, and the background will be more blurry. So as, for example, real quick, if you want to change the aperture, there's a dial up here on the Canon. It works very similar, if you have a Nikon, it'll be back here. If you have a Sony, it'll be somewhere right over here as well. If you change the dial, so right now we're going up to a higher number, so now we're at 13. I think that's what we were at a minute ago. I'm gonna go ahead and take a picture real quick. The camera's automatically calculating the ISO and the shutter speed, so it's calculating the other two factors for me, right? And right now you see that our model, let me make sure our model's in focus there. Yeah, I might shift the focus over a little teeny bit. Right now I've got the focus right here. I can move it over a little teeny bit right here and down to where it's right on her face. I'm gonna take another picture just to make sure I got crisp focus real quick. Okay. Hear that little beep? That's the perfect thing. So took a picture there. Notice how the entire background looks pretty crisp. The leaves are like, you see lots and lots of details in the background there. What I want you to do is now change that number from 13 down to a smaller number. So we're gonna go all the way down to 4.0 right now. So what I'm gonna do is change that number down to where it says 4.0. Now this lens can go down more than 4.0, but a lot of your lenses cannot. For instance, This lens that I just happen to have in my back pocket is the kit lens that comes with this Canon camera, and there's a very similar one that comes with the Nikon version and Sony version as well. And this lens is an 18 to 55, and you cannot go to a smaller number than 3.5. So we could go ahead and do that on this camera, or this lens right here, which has the ability to go to a lower number. This is the 50mm fixed lens, which is an awesome lens, very cheap. It's only like 125 bucks, so it's a great lens that I always recommend to start off with. Some people call it the Nifty 50. And now we're at 3.5, so let's go ahead and take a picture at 3.5. And remember, the smaller aperture number, the more blurry the background. So let's look at this transformation right here. Bam, look how much more blurry that background is. So we can go ahead and toggle between the previous image where the leaves are pretty darn crisp, and then this image right here where the leaves are less crisp and they're more blurry. So if you have this lens, right, an 18 to 55 kit lens, then you can go down to the number 3.5 or f3.5. It's an f-stop, and it's the aperture is going down to 3.5. You can do that on this lens, all right? So you could take a very similar picture to this with this lens. But if you have a Canon 50mm fixed lens or a Sony or a Nikon or whatever, you can do the exact same thing. So I'm going to show you what the background looks like when you make that number even smaller. The background is going to get even more blurry, and that's where you get that very shallow depth of field. Right now, it's kind of a medium depth of field. All right, so we're at 3.5 right here. We can see that with our aperture. I'm going to go down to 2.0. All right, well, I'll go down to 2.8. That's kind of the next setting there. I'm gonna do that first of all. I'm gonna take a picture right there. Allie, if you could keep on just looking beautiful and awesome, that would be fantastic. Thanks. Yeah, I know she has to work really hard for this, right? Okay, 3, 2, and beautiful. Now look how much blurrier the background looks now. So here's where we are at 2.8. And remember the larger number, 3.5, you see that background getting a little bit more crisp. And when we're at 13, it's super crisp. So a little bit less crisp, and now the background's getting even blurrier at 2.8. All right, so this lens, the 50mm, can go all the way down to 1.8. All right, and so as I talk about in my Master Your Camera course, we talk about extensively how to take full manual control of your camera, and you would know that 1.8 is actually a larger size hole. I don't want to get you confused right now, but that larger size hole, which is a smaller number, a little bit confusing, we talk about this extensively in the course, will create an even more blurry or shallower depth of field. More blurry background, more shallow depth of field. So let's go ahead and change our aperture to 1.8. So I'm going to twist this dial right up here. Click, click, click. One more click will take me to 1.8, and watch how beautiful the background looks when I take this picture, and then also how blurry it looks. So ready? 3, 2, and get in focus. 1. Beautiful. Look how gorgeous and how blurry that background is now that we're at 1.8. So real quick, let's go back and just take a look real quick. This is 1.8. This is at 2.8. Background's getting more crisp as we're having that number go up. This is 3.5. Background's getting a little bit more crisp. This is f13. So these are all f-stops. So it's f13, f3.5, f2.8, and f1.8. And as you see, as that number goes down, you have a more blurry background. And so just as a reminder, real quick, this lens that comes with most of your cameras, Nikon, Canon, Sony, right? It can only go down to 3.5, the max. So what that means is that you could not get a background more blurry than this right here with a kit lens that's like this. But when you have a lens, I'll show you guys real quick. It's a very simple, very inexpensive lens. This is the Canon 50mm 1.8 lens, means it can go down to 1.8. Okay, you can actually see that written right there. So this Canon 50mm 1.8 lens goes down to 1.8. And like we've said, 1.8 is a much smaller f-stop number, and that will allow you to have a much blurrier background. Hey folks, I hope you enjoyed that free tutorial. I'm so excited for you because the webinar is going to go so much deeper, and we're going to cover all 3 factors that go into taking amazing photos every single time. So if you haven't already, make sure and check your email to make sure you have the link to the webinar room. David Molnar here, and I'll see you soon.